Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to my channels. Today's guest is Ben, alias GNCcentric, who was recently kicked off Twitter and then kicked off of Medium for talking about or trying to state the fact that you might want to consider that there's a difference between the experiences of males and the experiences of females. In this discussion, we talk about her suspension, we talk about the things that she wasn't supposed to say, and we kind of wrangle around the issues that are having a huge impact on males and females because we're not allowed to speak about the differences between males and females. And you know what? The only way to solve this issue of free speech is to practice our free speech, and which goes to say, not just saying anything, but allowing the brain to do what the brain does best, what it's designed to do, which is to inquire and to process through different issues. And so here's me and Ben inquiring and processing for your listening pleasure.
But she had surgery once and her chart says male, so they brought her the thing to pee like for a man.
Yeah.
Like everything doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no. We're in pretzel world. It's not just upside down world anymore. There's so many different.
It's like wibbly wobbly.
People miss you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've been kind of busy with like real life stuff, so I've been kind of like not on YouTube very much. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, like my process to make YouTube videos is kind of nonsense. It's like I've just filmed a video over and over like 7 times until I like it. But my videos are like 30 minutes long, so it actually takes like a whole day. Yeah.
Well, at least you get good product out of yourself.
Thanks.
So what do you want to tell people that want to catch up with you? Like just a general sketch of how you're doing.
So I'm working on some detransition, like resources for people, like for online. I'm also working on doing some like meetups in real life. And since I've been suspended from both Twitter and Medium, which is where I was like putting my like more professional seeming work on Medium, I'm creating my own blog now so that it's like mine. It's going to be on a private server so people can't censor me with their
Yeah. Wait, why do you know why you were suspended by Medium?
I think, like, you know, this Caddy Montgomery, who's like the one that I was talking to on Twitter, who like I assume was the one who got me suspended. Because they were talking in the same thread as Fourth Wave Now, and then they were bragging about how they reported Fourth Wave Now, and we both got suspended like in the same thread at the same time. So I assume it's the same person. Anyway, on Medium, I like added her, like and it's like a little link. So she must have like seen that I was talking about her. But I just like said what I said in the tweet. I was like, I called this person a male in my tweet. That's it. And then my thing was taken down. I don't even think there was an appeal process open to me for Medium. I'm not quite sure. I read the email like once, but they were basically like, you have committed hateful conduct or something, so your account is suspended. Like, please take your work, like transfer your work off of Medium or whatever. Yeah.
So I wonder if, detransitioners have a lot going against them. And one of them is that they have to detransition physically and mentally from the mindset of being the other sex. And it seems like it's a minefield to be able to talk about that and run into trans people. And should you not say what you're dealing with? Should you not say that I'm trying to get back to an understanding of grounding my reality in my sex? And then you come across somebody who is still in a trans category, and to violate that trans category by calling them a male or a female is seen as hateful. So it seems like you guys need to form a network and then just not go there with other people. Is that what you're expected to do?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what happens. Like I'm sure you know, like when you detransition, if you make like a Facebook post, like a life event or whatever, you're detransitioning, a lot of people will just like block you or unfriend you overnight. And then like people will start circulating on Tumblr that you're like a TERP or something. So like automatically a lot of people don't talk to you. But like I know a detrans person who's friends with like a trans person, and the trans person is like an alcoholic and drug addict. And so my detrans friend keeps trying to like reach out to them and be like, I'm here for you. Like, what do you need? That kind of thing. But it's like very obvious that this person, the trans woman, that like a lot of her issues are rooted in like internalized homophobia, and like a lot of her issues are like to do with her being trans. And so my friend tries to talk to her about it, and be like, but like based in reality of like your male body is distressing to you or something. And this person like takes it like as a huge attack, and they like block them on Facebook every time they try to talk about this or something, or they like block their number until like later when they like change their mind or something. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can't even talk to these people. Like they don't want to hear what you have to say, so they just like that's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or if you do talk to them, they'll like take screen caps and like circulate them on Tumblr or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. So
So with a community like that that's formed around these things, and why it was formed might be an interesting discussion, because I'm sure it was formed under distress. There was a lot of people who were working through distress, and in the LGBT community reached out and established these communities online where they're helping each other, and so there's certain sorts of adversity that's mixed in there already, so that when part of their numbers, I guess, what's it called, defect back
yeah.
to a more straight way, or the cis countrysides outside, then that might be the reaction that we're seeing, might be a side effect of under the conditions that they were formed under.
Yeah, like I know I talked about this before, but it's really like a cult tactic to be like, oh, those are like suppressive people or whatever, like as the Scientologists say, that they're like
Mm-hmm.
outside the community, therefore they're harmful. They're like heretics who preach against the ideology, therefore they're harmful. And if you're associated with the heretic, you're like guilt by association.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's some people have compared it to when you leave like one person I talked to compared it to leaving Mormonism, that she left Mormonism, and like the way people, her family and people treated her is the way that the trans people treat detransitioners. That like they formed this community as like a way of being like, we're all together, we have the same struggle, and like this is the solution. And then when
Mm-hmm.
one person is like, yeah, I have the same struggle as you, I'm very similar to you, but the solution didn't work for me, or the solution made me worse, they're like, well, fuck, this is like our entire platform, so like fuck off and stay away from us because this is our reality. Like they're so desperate to maintain that this treatment is the only way that they can't even like conceive of somebody actually being
Mm-hmm.
dysphoric and actually needing something different to help them.
A community such as is forming around like the LGB Alliance, which I'm hoping to interview somebody from that alliance, could form, and there's also like there's this Reddit, this subreddit that I've been following for a while called LGB Drop the T.
Oh
And
yeah.
it seems like there's a lot of negative feelings between gays, lesbians, and bisexuals towards the trans group in that, and there might be a lot of different psychologies going on in there. But I see a problem with the contention that could possibly form within LGB communities against the trans community, is that they might have the opportunity to have a place for detransitioners to land, because
Yeah.
the detransitioners are going to have to give up a lot. They have to give up their community, and then they have to undergo that entire stress, the physical stress of detransition. They're going to need a support group, and
Yeah.
they're already a minority within a minority within a minority. So who's going to help this?
Yeah. Well, like from what I've seen, a lot of, because like most of the detransitioners I know, like not all, but most, seem to be like butch lesbians or like kind of gender nonconforming bisexuals. So
Mm-hmm.
they're finding support within like the like kind of rad femme lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so like the LGB Alliance or like the LGB Drop the T subreddit, those people, they're not against like trans people. Well, except for like people like Yaniv, obviously, but they're against like the ideology that like if you are gender nonconforming, that makes you a non-woman, or
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
have dysphoria, therefore transition is the like. They're against this ideology. So when somebody detransitions, most of them, the vast majority, have rejected this ideology after their personal experience of living through it. So it makes sense for them to join up with these other people who are rejecting the ideology.
Okay. Okay.
But what's happening is that when the trans people, or like the even not even the trans people, but like the gender extremist types, when they see this, they're like, oh, see, they're like forming an alliance against us because they hate trans people. Or something that I saw recently was people were saying on Reddit that like one of these detransitioners was actually just like a rad femme like for posting, pretending to be a detransitioner. Like they literally think it's like some kind of a conspiracy against trans people, but it's like a lot of the people like who support like LGBT Alliance, for example, they're like they have like the pretty common experience of like lesbians who like for little kids think that they're supposed to be a boy or something, and then they grow up and they realize, oh, I'm a lesbian, and they're like looking and seeing these children who went through the exact same thing as them but are now being put on hormones, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? So like I think they're just like seeing what's happening and they're upset about it and they want to talk about it. That doesn't mean that they're trying to like attack trans people, if that makes sense.
Well, it's also conflated by the fact that there are a lot of people who are treating you like what the treatment that you've received. Like you've been kicked off and deplatformed. Like it's not enough for these people to reject those who reject their ideology. They want to. It seems like there's a pattern of behavior that's backed up by these big companies of actually suppressing these alternate viewpoints.
Well, not to be like too Scientology obsessed, but it's like they've done that kind of shit, like suing people who write books about them or something, you know, like to silence them. That's more like, you know, hardcore. But yeah, like, okay. So part of cult tactics is to suppress information or to disseminate misinformation. So even before I got kicked off of Twitter, I was on 125 block lists. So that's like a lot of block lists. So I assume that most like trans extremist types already had me blocked and couldn't even see what I was saying. So like my information was only getting to like the people who wanted to see it anyway. But at least on Twitter, like I had like senators from the US talk to me, like journalists talk to me, like random psychiatrists from like all over the country, like different countries talking to me, like because I was on there like publicly. And now that I don't have Twitter, like these options are gone. So like also with Medium, like Medium is really, really like gender extremist, like I don't know. It's like,
I guess.
Yeah. There's like a lot of people talking about like the awesomeness of pediatric transition or those kind of things, or like how transition helped them with their mental health or whatever. Like tons and tons of articles about that. So I would go and post my articles and I would like tag them like transition, like those kind of things. And then those people, even if they were hate reading me, they were still reading me and seeing what I had to say a bit. Like, so I was still, or like people who were like not up to what's going on with gender critical versus like gender extremists, they would like read what I have to say and be like, think about it maybe. But now, if I create my own blog, which I am, the only people who are going to read my blog are people who want to see what I have to say. Like, I'm not going to be like accessing like everyone the same way that I did on Twitter or Medium. So like you've effectively like put me in like a corner of like only gender critical or detrans people are going to like look me up and read what I have to say.
Yeah. It's a reversion back to a prior state of the internet. So there was an internet which was just a bunch of blogs and you know lists and forums, and then there was these companies that came through and collated or brought everybody together. There's these big platforms that came through, and then now you're being thrown back, 10 years or 15 years back to people actually have to look you up. And then all the search algorithms and stuff can work in your favor or not work in your favor.
Yeah.
The algorithm is a platform too,
Yeah,
of
exactly.
how are you going to get found?
Like, when you used to search GNCcentric, the first thing that came up was my Twitter feed. Like, and from my Twitter feed is like where people like started to understand who I was. So my plan now is to just try and make like a lot of YouTube videos like very consistently, because YouTube is one of the few places where I know for a fact, because I can read my comments, I know for a fact that a lot of gender extremists or trans rights activists somehow end up watching my videos and they're like, oh, you're evil and you suck, blah blah blah. But at least they like saw my videos. So like I know that on YouTube I can like reach like a wider like variety of people. So I'm going to try and like stick to YouTube. Well, yeah. Well, I'm never attempting to monetize my YouTube, like, because I don't even want to deal with that shit. Like Patreon is enough for me. Also Patreon, I'm being careful. I don't want to be kicked off. We'll see what happens. It's like a minefield everywhere you go. And it's like, I'm kind of almost scared to post. I've made like 2 or 3 drafts of like videos about the Megan Murphy event in Toronto because I was there. but I'm almost scared to talk about it because like I mentioned Yaniv because that's like part of why Megan Murphy was like kicked off Twitter and stuff, or why she was branded transphobic, and I'm almost scared to post it because like I don't know, people might report me and get my videos taken down or something.
Yaniv is a fascinating case. He's I'm sorry. No, I'm not. But anyways,
That person.
openly misogynistic. I mean, the way that every single person they've abused and targeted is consistently female
Yeah.
sexed. Like
Yeah.
they, with a heavy quotes around that pronoun there, love Blair White, plays around with Blair White all the time. Blair White's a
Yeah, yeah,
male.
I know.
And I
Yeah.
think that Yaniv really enjoys that attention, but also hates women.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a difficult thing to suss out with that portion or that psychology of I don't even think that they're legitimately trans no matter
Me
how
either.
you cut it, but
Yeah.
it's a minefield. But I don't
People like
think
Blair
that
White can agree with you. Like real transsexuals like Blair White, they also agree with you. Like
yeah.
I don't see anything about this person that indicates that they have dysphoria to the degree that they like require medical or social transition. They just want to be seen as a woman for some reason. But
No,
it's
there's
clearly not dysphoria with the way that they talk about themselves and other people and like the sexual stuff they're doing with teenagers. Like if you were honestly dysphoric, you wouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. Like if
so
like
you
if
don't
you
want
have
to talk.
oh,
No, go
sorry,
on.
yeah. No, I was gonna say I was gonna get more explicit into like dysphoria and sexual stuff, but I maybe no, it's not a good idea with Yaniv.
Yeah. I wanted to move away from.
Yeah, let's move away from that.
But you don't want to talk about the Megan Murphy event. But you were there. Can you give
No,
us any
I'll talk
juicy
about it.
tidbits of it?
Yeah, okay, so I was kind of involved in like the organization or planning of it. So I
Can you
was like
contextualize this for people who don't know what we're talking
okay,
about?
so Megan Murphy is like a radical feminist from Vancouver. Who she's one of the few people in Canada who talks about like how gender self-ID and Bill C-16, which like enforces gender self-ID, is harmful to females and women. And honestly, like she wasn't that popular until all the trans activists started flipping out about her. So like, congrats to them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's done a couple talks. Like in Vancouver, she talked in Glasgow. She's done a couple talks in different places. Like and she often gets picketed, or like she gets like so many threats that they have to change the location of the event. Like it's a very contentious situation. So she was invited by a radical feminist group to Toronto, and so we organized the event, and
This was in October.
it was October 29th, the event. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
October. All right.
I also ended up in the hospital that night, so like I remember very clearly.
Oh yeah.
Fun times. But okay, so we were having this event, and before the event even happened, people were like flipping out. Even our mayor, John Tory, was all like, "Oh, this transphobic person disseminating hate speech, blah blah blah, nonsense." Clearly doesn't even know what she talks about. Lots of journalists were writing articles being like, "Oh, this transphobe is coming to Toronto." Meanwhile, like none of them actually quoted what she said, or if they did, it was like half a sentence. So this event was planned, and the week before it was supposed to happen, or the week before it happened, the Toronto Public Library, they had a board meeting, and they had like this like forum for people to depute about the Megan Murphy event. So there was a really people really misconstrued the situation because legally, based on a lawyer I know who's done work on like this type of topic, they didn't have the option to cancel the event because Megan has not actually been convicted of hate speech, right? people tried to do that with one of her speeches in Vancouver. They tried to they said they were going to bring her to court, but I guess a lawyer looked it over and realized there's nothing you can bring her to court for because she didn't say anything hateful. So that's the only situation in which they would shut down the talk. So she hadn't been convicted of hate speech. So shutting down the talk would be stopping freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which the public library is for freedom of speech, right? So there was never any chance that the event would be shut down, but these people clearly thought there was. I don't know where they got this idea. So Pride Toronto, the 519, which is a gay community center in Toronto, which is a big advocacy group kind of thing, and Glad Day Books, which is another institution. It's the oldest queer bookstore in the world or whatever. They all spoke, people from them. A bunch of other random trans people spoke, and a lot of them broke down in tears explaining about how they've been sexually assaulted or something. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? If Megan Murphy is saying that you're a male, the people who assault you are not being oh, I heard a radical feminist say this, therefore I'm going to, it has literally nothing to do with it. Also, when I went up to talk, I was talking about, the legal, rights that she has to speak. And, they were doing appeals to emotion. It has nothing to do with anything, really. Obviously, it's sad that they've been assaulted, but that shouldn't stop someone else's freedom of speech, Yeah, I don't know. So also it made me really angry because not a single one of them ever mentioned trans men. Everything was about trans women, and I know for a fact that one of the people who spoke has sexually assaulted one of the trans women who spoke, crying about her sexual assaults. I know for a fact that person has sexually assaulted at least 2 trans-identified females. And I was like, why the fuck is no one talking about the trans men? Because clearly everything is about, I'm not going to say anything too provocative. Trans women.
Yeah. There's a big story there.
Yeah, it really, really pissed me off.
But we'll save it for another time, yeah.
Yeah, so I went up to Depute, and I was wearing this, vest with, all this, gay rights kind of stuff. People assumed that me and my girlfriend were there, on the side of, the gender ideologues. When I went up to speak, they all started booing. And I said, that was the day that we had the deputations and the board meeting was also the day that the verdict for Yaniv was passed down. So I read the verdict, and I was like, Megan Murphy said that Yaniv is, using these laws to exploit and harass women. The member who saw the Human Rights Tribunal agrees and said, yeah, Yaniv is racist. They're using these laws to exploit and abuse women. So she was vindicated. So why is it that when she's vindicated about this, she should be shut down from free speech when she's just speaking the truth? That's what I said, basically. I mean, I'll give you a link. Somebody put it on Vimeo, what I said. But okay. I'll give you a link. But yeah, okay. That's basically what I said. I was like, she was accused of hate speech for calling this out, and she was accused of being transphobic for calling this individual out, and that's why all the media is calling her evil. But this individual literally is doing what she said they were doing. So what the fuck is that? And later at the event, the next week, I actually tried to talk to somebody about one of the protesters about Yaniv, and they acted like they had no idea what I was talking about. Every fucking queer person in Canada knows what's going on with Yaniv, and they were like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. Anyway, so at the deputation, one of the women went up and spoke. She talked about how her grandmother, who grew up in Yemen, who used to beg on the streets, had to get her hymen checked, even as a 4-year-old, because it would bring dishonor to the family if she had been raped as a beggar on the streets, and that she was she only experienced this because she's a female. And then she talked about how Boko Haram, they kidnap or enslave girls specifically because they want sex slaves that they can make pregnant. She's like, you can't identify out of that. It's happening because they're a female. And all of over 100 people who were at this deputation were booing her. I was like, does that mean you support Boko Haram? Can you think about what you're saying right now? One of them was yelling, your opinion is wrong. I was like, do you know what an opinion, what? I would my girlfriend said it was the scene from 1984 where they're all yelling at the screen. They were they were frothing at the mouth yelling about, and I was like, do you even know what she's saying? Does that mean you support these misogynist practices or something? I don't know. she had to be escorted out of the building by security because they were like yelling at her in the hallways, the trans activists. When I was leaving, a bunch of them called me TERF and they spit on the ground in front of me. Which like
How
I
was
was
that for you?
I was angry. I was like, you fucking lesbophobes. I mean, I didn't use the F word, but I was like, you lesbophobes or something.
Okay, yeah. I can't
Yeah, I don't
imagine
know.
you being cowed by that kind of behavior.
No, like, well, I was there with like a friend of mine, who has like experience with these types of like public event type things, and also like my girlfriend who's like, you know, so I was like safe. Um, like she grew up in a war zone, so I think I'm happy with her. She'll keep me safe. So yeah, it was really something though to see like there was literally one of the people who went up to depute looked like a man. They had like a shaved head and like a beard, and they were all like, "As a woman, I sit here today," blah blah blah. And I was like, "What is even happening? Like, what did they?" It was just like mind-boggling what was happening. Yeah.
So that
Uh,
was the deposition. Is that the right word?
I don't know. It was a
Okay.
Toronto Public
Yeah.
Library board meeting, but at the end
Okay.
of it,
So that was the board meeting.
yeah. So but that's when I first got a taste of like how crazy this event was going to be. Like when I first like saw of like obviously not everybody who was going to show up to protest the event was there, but I kind of got a taste for it, right? So after that, a bunch of journalists reported on it, and they were all like, "Oh, the Toronto Public Library is supporting this transphobe, blah blah blah." All kinds of horrible bullshit that doesn't make any sense. Like they have to let her speak. Anyway, so then the event happened. So I got there super early, and the people, I think at the end there was over 1,000 protesters. You have to understand though, this is the smallest library in Toronto, like the smallest. It's like there's one washroom and it's like a gender neutral washroom that's like one stall. Like it's such a tiny library. There's like 4 tables to sit down and like one desk, and like it's so tiny. There was over 1,000 protesters outside. Megan Murphy had bodyguards, and at the beginning there was like over 20 cops there because they were expecting like the queer activists to get out of hand. The protesters did this really strange thing where they were trying to do like a read-in because it's like a library, and they had this one like trans poet, like such bad poetry, and they were like open a book and they were like reading one line of the poetry, and then the whole crowd would repeat the line 3 times. It was so creepy. It was like an occult
Wow.
movie. It was really, really creepy. And there's like little kid. People brought their babies in strollers and stuff, like little kids who were also repeating it. It was so creepy. They were just yelling and screaming over and over again, like trans rights are human rights, trans women are women, and like of course a very little mention of trans men, obviously, because who cares? There was so many people with like posters and stuff, like people like there was also like fucking like former city council member was there, a sitting city council member was there, like a former member of parliament for Ontario was there. Like a lot of people who like had some kind of clout were there.
On the side of the protesters.
Yeah. So things got pretty crazy. So the event, we had like cops there, and we're checking people's IDs and checking their tickets to make sure like the right people are getting in. And people coming into I talked to some people who literally didn't come to the event because they got there. There was a wall of protesters around the entire library, and they said they physically could not get into the library, so they left. So good job, protesters, I guess. But like other people, my girlfriend was kind of acting as like an escort on the outside of the building. And she said like the trans activists were like stopping like women who were trying to get in and being like, you don't have to go here, like you don't have to do this, like we can talk about this or something, as if they had been forced to go or something. One of the trans activists had a sign saying like, I don't remember what exactly it said, but it was basically like the event is this way, and it was pointing like the other direction to like some trans activists who were trying to talk people out of going. Eventually they were on like the steps of the library. You literally had to like push through their bodies to get into the event. But some of the female cops were like kind of pushing them out of the way and being like, these people have a right to be here, like you have to let them in. Yeah, so it was like really fucking intense.
What was the content? What was this thing that was so deadly and dangerous that Megan Murphy said at this specific event?
Literally, I expected it to be way more controversial than what she actually said. She was like, oh, women in sports are having their scholarships taken away and they're losing like their livelihood of like being a top athlete. And then she was like, oh, we have 10 males in female prisons in Canada and half of them have been convicted of sexual crimes. Like, let's think about that. Let's talk about that. We should be able to talk about that. Or she was like talking about how what happened to the Vancouver rape relief, where they were like nailing dead rats to the door and like spray painting. And she was like, these are like just rape victims going to a support group, and this is what they have to walk through. Like, I don't know, like she didn't say anything like trans people deserve XYZ, or trans people are like, she didn't say anything specific that was harmful. Yeah, I like she barely actually addressed like she addressed like what's happening in the law, what's happening with the ideology, what some of the extremists are doing, but she didn't address like trans people as a whole. So like she never said trans women are not women. She said trans women can like identify as women but they're male, which is like true. Otherwise, why would they need transition? Why would they need SRS if they're not male?
Well, even if it's true that that specific line of that specific statement is what got you kicked off of now two major platforms. So
Yeah. Do you want me to finish up the Megan Murphy thing though?
yeah, sure, yeah. Well, there's the afterwards. So I just want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, so as we were leaving, we were supposed to go out of the front of the library, but by then the protest had gotten like so insane. Like that's when like they really reached the peak, was like the end of the event, that the cops started escorting us to go out of the library, at the back, I mean. So as soon as the event was over, like Megan Murphy and her bodyguards, they were gone, like right away, gone, so that she was safe. But like us normal people, we started to go out the back of the library, but there's like a little hallway to the back door, and on each side there was like a line of protesters who they were screaming trans women are women, trans rights are human rights or something. And I was like, nobody is contesting that like trans people shouldn't have rights or something, but they were just like screaming and frothing at us, like you couldn't speak to them. And we had to walk through this to get out the back door. And once we got out the back door, there's like an alley beside the library, and the protest was so huge that people were like kind of in the alley, and when they saw us coming out the back door, they started chasing us. So we literally like ran down an alley, and then we went in like random circles around the neighborhood to make sure we weren't being followed.
Was
Yeah,
anybody assaulted at all, or was it just did it?
no, the
Okay,
cops,
good.
from what I heard, some like tense situations happened with the protests, but the cops like tried like de-escalated things before anything got violent. Like just like separating people and being like, can you do your own thing or whatever. Yeah. The But my girlfriend who was out there, she said there was this random free speech guy that he wasn't a feminist, he was just a free speech person. He had like some signs about free speech, and like the trans activists were being like, slit your wrist and drink bleach, you asshole, or something, like to his face, like really horrific shit. Also, I don't think the trans activists thought this through at all. If you condemn Megan Murphy's free speech because a big group of people don't like what she has to say, what the fuck is going to happen when you try and host a gay event, and then you have like a bunch of, I don't know, like conservative Christians who are like, oh, this is like against my whatever. Like, then they can shut you down. Like, it works both ways. I don't know if anybody thought of this. Anyway, so the protesters chased us out of there, which was crazy. Thank God there was so many cops there, because like it was really nuts.
I wonder.
By the time
Did you get a number of how much that cost the city?
I'm
I
not
wonder.
sure, but they were
Okay.
there because it was like a public library event, so they weren't there like for like the Megan Murphy thing. They were there for like the public libraries, like
Yeah, but
safety.
still, that's taking resources from the city from
Yeah.
fighting actual crime.
Well, yeah. Also, like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to share this, but I'll tell you anyway. There was a cop who used to be in the hate crimes division, who he went inside of the event and stood and watched what Megan Murphy had to say, and according to him, nothing even approached hate speech. And he used to like work in that division. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm
And then
still not I'm still trying to wrestle with something like that, the hate crimes division, or what a hate crime is.
Well, I mean, I can
I
understand
mean,
what a hate
I know
crime
it.
is, but it's like
I understand. Yeah.
yeah, but it's definitely a nuanced thing of like,
Yeah.
yeah, like every single time a trans person is murdered, it's not necessarily because they are trans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
if a
Well,
gay
that's an
person is
actual
murdered, it's not
crime, but like I was
necessarily
just
because they were gay. Like, do you
yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah.
It's very easily it very easily morphs. Like I was reading the Washington Post, and they wrote a story about like a swastika that was drawn in a college restroom, right? Just like I don't. That's 2 lines, but they're like a possible hate crime of a swastika being drawn. Like, how is that a crime? How is
It's
it a
not like
crime to
against a
write on a
specific
wall?
person for like that purpose. Like,
Maybe it's a
it's not
hate
like
misdemeanor or something like that.
yeah. I mean, you have to. I don't know. I don't
I mean,
really
I
like know a lot
understand.
about this topic, but I'm like, yeah, I think that like the the trans lobbyists or extremists or whatever, they've really latched onto this like human rights thing and hate and like hate crime thing. But just like how they don't understand free speech, they obviously don't understand actually what a human right is, or actually, like, with rights come responsibility. Like, if you have the right to do XYZ, you have the responsibility to uphold XYZ in society. Like, they don't know or don't care. Like, same thing with, like, hate crimes, I assume. They're just like any single person who is of XYZ group and gets hurt, therefore it's a hate crime. And it's like, if you actually looked at, like, the circumstances, maybe it's not a hate crime. Maybe it's a domestic issue or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, how do you modify? I guess you don't want to. You want to start your own blog, but like just giving advice or just thinking out loud about how does one modify their behavior so that they're not inciting hate against trans people and still asserting their understanding what reality is with
well,
regards
all
to
you have to
sex.
do is conform to the cult's acceptable language.
Okay.
So, what my offense was, let me find my tweet. My offense here. Okay. So I said to this person, I'm going to like skip like the first part, just the last sentence is what is relevant. I said, "You presume to know the female motivators for transition when you are in fact male." When I wrote this tweet, I first wrote when you are in fact male born. And then I was like, no, born male. And then I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't have to like couch my stuff in like, if you say that somebody is born male, it's like assuming that they've now transitioned to be actually female, which I don't believe you can do. So I was like, I'm not going to use their language. I'm going to use like the language of reality. This person is a male. End of story. I could have used AMAB, assigned male at birth. I could have used like, like queer language, and then it might have been okay. But like
Pretzel language, yeah.
I'm done like censoring myself in that way, and I'm done like kowtowing to their like delusional based like language. Like, it's assigned male at birth. It's just if you actually think about what those words mean and like the history of what it means to be assigned at birth, like it just doesn't. I'm just done with that shit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
So
now
if
it's
you,
coercively assigned male at birth, but whatever.
I mean,
But it's a really serious issue because what you were saying in that tweet, if I can extrapolate, not having read the conversation, was that the motivators behind a female transitioning to male are separate than those that are distinct from those that would motivate a male to transition into a female. And if you can't talk about those two things as different categories, it gets muddled. You can't actually look at what is causing somebody and all the different steps to actually suss out why a female would need to go or want to go into that entire process.
yeah. Well, what I was referencing was, I don't remember the timeline for it, but there has been a 4,400% increase in females under the age of 18 being referred for transition in the UK. 4,400%. Where in science do you see a number like that and you're like, oh, that's expected, that's normal? Like, it's a ridiculous inflation of what was expected by like the NHS's gender identity services. So clearly there's something going on that we need to look at. This is not like no problem, like easy peasy. This is something is happening. And I was like, we need to talk about what is happening, why this is happening like this. Because if you look like 10 years ago, most people transitioning were males. Like the numbers were a little bit more male, and now it's like way more female. So something has changed. either in like the way service is provided or in the way that the community is supporting females to transit. Like something has changed and we need to talk about it. And the gender ideologues, like the one who I was talking to, Caddy Montgomery, they're like, oh, no, you see the data is being collected differently now? Or they're like, oh, no, you don't understand. Like, if you look at the trajectory of how many people are transitioning, this is actually what we should have expected. Or, like, they have all of these, like arguments that, like, if you just look at the cold, hard facts, their arguments don't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, exactly like you were saying, like, females transition for different reasons than males. Teenagers transition for different reasons than adults. Kids who present as gender non, like little children who present as gender nonconforming or have dysphoria is a whole different game than adults. Like, so what queer theory does really well is that they like group people together, or they group things together that don't really make much sense, and then it's all like a vague mess. So you have like autogynephilic men or like fetishists grouped with like teenage onset female dysphoria, rapid onset gender dysphoria, like all of these things are grouped together, and it's like, oh, it's the same problem, same treatment. But it's like, actually, no. If you sat down and talked to these people, you would see like, oh, a lot of these females have trauma. A lot of these females feel that they're inadequate to be a woman in society. Like, if you sat down and talked to them, it's like a completely different thing than like an adult male who is like, I want to be a woman because I've always wanted to like wear lipstick and heels, and it's not socially acceptable for me to do that. Or like it's a completely different thing. So like, why are they all being treated as the exact same? So like, that's part of what I do is like I constantly ask questions. It's like my thing. Ask questions as much as you want. Get as much information as possible. Like it shouldn't. There should be no questions off limit if you actually want to understand what's going on. So yeah. So this person is all like saying that detransitioners are political pawns and I don't know, other nonsense like that.
Yeah.
So basically to like discredit us, like, oh, don't listen to them because they're just like full of whatever, or they're talking
and probably this person has done this enough to know that all they need is a certain reaction out of you to silence you. So they're going to keep badgering you until.
Some detransitioners have like been tweeting about it, and like retweeting it and talking in private DMs, saying like, avoid this person, block this person, because they literally go to detransitioners' Twitter feeds and like bait them, being like, oh, I'm here to support detransitioners, I'm totally on your side, and then it's like they have a conversation with them, and then they report their tweet and get them like kicked off. So like this is their game. They're meticulous about it. They have a goal. They know what they're doing. They're baiting people and then getting them kicked off of Twitter or suspended from Twitter. Like, this is what they're doing. So, I don't know. It's really hard to fight against somebody who knows how the Twitter system works and wants to get people kicked off of Twitter. Like, there's not much you can do other than, like, block this person and not react to them. But, like, there's others like them out there. Yeah.
And like you said, you might just need to just adopt their language and then therefore adopt their worldview, and therefore they win. And you're like, stuck. Yeah. In using their dissociation between what you see reality is and what they are enforcing reality to be.
Like, their language is doublespeak. By like using doublespeak, you're conceding that this delusion is more real than reality somehow, or more important than reality. And like, I'm fucking done talking in doublespeak. I want to speak plainly and say like what is happening clearly.
Well, there was this beautiful tweet. This woman, in the wake of the J.K. Rowling debacle, or her tweet, and all the fallout of that, a lot of people came out and made different arguments on different sides. And one woman was making the argument that category doesn't matter. And she said, quoting her, somebody asked, well, how do you differentiate a man and a woman if we discard physical reality? And this person said, it's a glorious mess, and somehow we know whether we are men or women or neither, and there's no need to define a real man or a real woman. That's led to oppression. And I understand that to them, any category leads to oppression. But in reality, the lack of category leads to disaster. You can't actually, if you can't define a problem, if you can't define the terms, if you can't look at objects as objects, but it's just one beautiful hummus, just pulverized, food processed chaos, then that's going to lead to disaster. Like you were saying at the beginning that we cut out about, like, what about these women? What about these biological women going through transition, and then this system that's built to help people doesn't understand that a male and a female is different, or is not allowed to understand the differences anymore. What's
Yeah.
going to happen to these people? They're just going to be the people who are going to suffer the most are the people who are being championed by this
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah. Like, the easiest way that I can explain this that people will understand is like, if you won't concede that someone who is black, then how can you have affirmative action if you can't recognize them? Right? So, like, same thing. Like, if you can't differentiate who's a female and who's a male, then how do you have female-only rape crisis centers? Like, or like, there's like special scholarships in STEM that are for women. Are they going to be getting them now if you can't tell who's a woman? Like, everything like that now, it's like you said, it's like you make it a big mush and then it doesn't help anyone. Yeah. I don't know, like.
And the ultimate reality for them is oppression. The ultimate reality is whoever can prove that they suffer most, which is just the person that's crying the loudest. You know, it's it's an oppression Olympics, but it devolves into not even Olympics anymore. It's just a nursery with a bunch of babies, and the loudest one is going to get the most resources. It's like the chicks in the nest situation.
And it's funny that like the loudest one always happens to be someone who was born with a penis. Like, shocking. Like, how many trans men can you name off the top of your head who are working on like trans advocacy, or who are on like a board of like GLAAD or something like that? Like, there's almost none. So it's like you said, whoever talks the loudest, which, like, if you look in like sociology and stuff, it's like a recorded or psychology, it's like a recorded phenomenon that like males talk over females, males are more assertive, females will like let men talk over them, stuff like that. Like, it's literally the same thing in the trans movement. You have all of these male born people who are like leading shit, and then you have all these female people who are like following them. And it's like, just because you said you're trans doesn't mean everything has changed. Like, whoever talks
and if
loudest.
you can't and again, if you can't recognize the pattern of a male and a female, if you're not allowed to recognize that pattern, the power dynamic isn't going to change at all. It's just going to go underground, and there's going to be a bunch of gaslighting.
Well, that's exactly what happens. So I know, like, I would say the majority of people I know who are trans men or used to be trans men have been sexually or physically assaulted by trans-identified males. So I know that I'm like horrible now, transphobic stereotype, blah, blah, blah. But what happens is that they're like, oh, well, you have male privilege. You were the man in the situation. You had the power. So why didn't you stop them? And it's like, no, this person has a female body and this person has a male body, and they pinned them down. It's like the female and male identification doesn't stop this kind of thing from happening. Or once it does happen, then you can't talk about it because they're like, oh, well, how could you do something so transphobic as to call a trans woman a rapist or something? And it's like, yeah, like, these voices are not amplified, they're silenced, so it's not being addressed. Like, there's like pretty famous, well-known trans people who are like known rapists, like Ellie Ehrlich, I think is the name. They run the Trans Student Education Resources, TSER, and they have like admitted to raping someone. And it's like, there's screen caps on the internet, and they still run this organization that is like for educational tools for like high schoolers. And it's like, because they're the loudest about being the most oppressed, anything that's happening with the females in the community is you can overlook it.
Yeah, all of their oppression gets
and like
swept under the rug.
Just because this trans woman maybe has been like assaulted by another man doesn't mean that they're assaulting females is like somehow cancel each other out. It doesn't work that way. Like, I know one of the people I know who was sexually assaulted, a trans man who detransitioned. They were assaulted by a trans woman who was a prostitute. So, like, just because this person is being, like, abused by men every day doesn't cancel out the fact that they abused a woman. Like, they seem to think that because they've been hurt, that, like, I don't know, like
Hmm.
it's really fucked up the dynamics in the community. Um,
Well,
yeah, and
you know
like
what?
you'll try and tell your friends about it, and they'll be like, "Let
Yeah.
me explain to you why this wasn't actually a rape," or "Let me explain to you why this person is so much more oppressed than you that even if you said something, it's like not right of you because you're like contributing to their oppression or something." So then,
Hmm.
like you said,
Hmm.
gaslighting. That's why I mentioned this. Like it's all
Hmm.
gaslighting.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm. All the way down. It's a
yeah.
gaseous planet. That's a lit, or soon will be. So there's two ways of going about this, and one is to call out the bad actors and to call out the bad behavior, and that's absolutely valid and it needs to happen. But there's another thing to do, which is just to build a support network for people who are going to eventually get out of there, get out of this. And I think that what you're involved in and a lot of other people are involved in are trying to just establish resources for people who want to look at the world differently after transition, or
Hmm.
want to reassess their transition in a way.
Hmm.
What are some of the resources that you're developing, or some of the people that you think should be top followers for people who are going through these issues?
Um. Okay, so Carrie Callahan is somebody to watch out for. Karina Cohn, I think that's how you say
Mm-hmm.
the name.
Karina,
Um,
yeah.
Charlie Evans. Um, Off the top of my head, that's who I can think of. There's other
Mm-hmm.
people too, but that's who I think of off the top of my head. Um,
What's the theme? What's the theme that what's something that you
they're
think that they're providing that could strengthen somebody in this detransition process?
they are questioning the medical process that is affirmation only, no questions asked. They're questioning like what is actually healthy for the long-term health of people who have dysphoria, what is the actual like most evidence-based way to help them get better. Um, and they're trying to provide like an outlet so that detransition people and trans people both ways can talk about like the how the medical system either hurt them or didn't help them properly, something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the gender care, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of it.
We'll link it down there. There's so
Yeah,
many different
there's one
alliances.
organization that it's for trans people and detransition people, and it's Gender Care Consumer Network, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's wrong, but whatever. They're working on like, so they take it from both the detrans perspective and the trans perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
like they, yeah, so they're trying to like look out for people, but they're not like ideological about it. They're like science based about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm trying to do right now is establish a network of therapists in Canada who are willing to do like sliding scale payments or like Skype therapy or something like for Canadians who are detransitioning. Because one of the problems you have is if you have any issue with your gender or sexuality, they always send you to the same LGBT networks that were the ones who gave you the therapy to tell you that you're trans or to enforce your transition. Like, so when you're detransitioning, you're like, oh, doctor, I need help with my gender stuff. And the doctor will be like, oh, yeah, sure. So they send you back to the same people and they get the same fucking therapist. And the therapist is like, but you were so happy when you were transitioning. What's going on now? Like, oh, but you passed so well. It doesn't make sense for you to detransition. Like, you're basically a man now. Why would you try to, like, so
So
these
the
therapists,
affirmation never stops, and
yeah,
therefore the questions can never take hold.
exactly. So we need therapists who are willing to like actually work with people and be like, okay, this is how you were traumatized. This is like the medical trauma you experienced. Like, this is the early childhood trauma that caused some of this, or like to actually explore like why you have dysphoria, how you can help alleviate the dysphoria partially, and then also like to help you deconstruct like your experience of transition because it's like really like a huge mind fuck. Um, like you can't even imagine somebody who's been using like only male washrooms for like 10 years. When they go to the washroom, they automatically walk to the male washroom and they're like, oh, wait, I'm a female now. And they're like, but do I actually have the confidence to go into the female washroom now that I'm so like masculine looking? Like, it's such a
Hmm.
huge, like, it just messes with your brain so much.
Hmm.
And like, so we need therapists who are willing to like help with this issue specifically. Uh, Another thing we need is doctors because I know people who've like they've gone back to their endocrinologist or something and they're like they act as if it's a self-harm to go off of your hormones to detransition. Um
It's a
or
self harm. So the doctors
Yeah.
are saying, well, you're harming yourself by reverting to your natal sex.
Yeah. Because they're like, well, you were diagnosed as trans, so then you should be transitioning because that's the treatment. End of story.
Wow. It's so
And
weird that we're in this synthetic world, that you proceed into such a synthetic world that the natural world itself is evil or
yeah,
unnatural.
yeah. Like, you have these doctors who are like looking at the chart of a female born person that says male, and they're like, oh, well, for a male, your testosterone levels are low, so let's up your T. And it's like, I know people who've gone back to their endocrinologist and be like, I want to revert to like my natal body chemistry. Like I want my body chemistry to reflect that I'm a female. I want it to be like natural and normal again. And the endocrinologists are just like, well, we don't really like have any specific protocols for this type of a situation, or like I'm not comfortable helping you with this type of so like they basically like blow them off. Also, like I know somebody who they wanted to change their sex back, like legally. So they went to the doctor and their family doctor who like is like at a trans clinic, and they were like, can you write me a letter to bring to like the DMV or whatever to change my sex? And the doctor's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then like 4 months later, the doctor like never wrote it. They're not interested in writing it. Like their entire job is affirming people transitioning. Can you imagine how it would look for them to write a letter to be like, no, this person would actually shouldn't have transitioned and their mental health is better now that they've detransitioned? Like they're set up to do one thing, and like if you're not doing that thing, they're not there to help you.
All shoots, no
So
ladders.
exactly. Like you can go in, but you can't get out. So yeah, we need doctors to help with that kind of thing too.
The Sarlacc pit of gender therapy. Jeez, sorry. It's a minefield to talk about this stuff. And I think that it's important. I mean, this is a meta conversation or a conversation about communication. And how do you go about establishing these networks that don't that aren't perceived as hated or as hate groups, and then that don't accumulate a bunch of hate, like with the Megan Murphy event, with your being deplatformed, with all these different people being deplatformed. How do we talk about these issues? What are we allowed to talk about? How do we go about presenting the paths for people to speak about these things, or say, discussion zones where discussion is the rule, not deplatforming?
Yeah, well, that's part of why I wanted to be involved with the Megan Murphy event. Was I was thinking like Megan Murphy is just saying like fact-based, reality-based statements. She's not like promoting an ideology. She's just being like, yeah, these people are male, or these people are female, or this is what's happening in the law. So she's just stating facts. And for just stating facts, the gender ideologues lost their friggin' minds, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking like, what if we ever have a detransition event and we're just stating facts, like we don't have enough data about this, or this is like the anecdotal evidence we've seen in these hundreds of people. Like if we're just stating facts, and the gender ideologues will lose their minds again. So like I think that we need to be able to, like you said, we need to be able to have a place where you can have like a forum to discuss things, especially like self-ID and everything. Like it's a very nuanced topic. It's not a shut up and do this. It's very nuanced. We need to be able to discuss it. So like detransition is extremely nuanced, and we need to be able to have discussions and forums and like open communication about it. And like as we've seen with the like gender ideologues, they like to just shut down detransition people, or like discredit us or dismiss
Your
us.
lived experience is hate speech to
Yeah,
them.
no, I literally was okay. One time I was tweeting and I was like, when I identified as a male and told everyone I was a male and told myself I was a male and looked down at my body and saw I was female, that's when my dysphoria was at its worst. And somebody commented saying like, how dare you call a trans man a female? And I was like, this is literally my fucking experience with my body. Like, who the fuck are you? Like, why is it that in the queer community, lived experience is like the number one most important thing? It overrides data, it overrides science, it overrides history, right? But when it comes to my lived
Affirmation
experience,
only.
yeah, when it comes to my experience, though, it's like, oh, well, it contradicts the experience of XYZ people who are more important than you, so shut up. Like, or they're basically like, detransitioners are collateral damage, but it's acceptable because trans people are so oppressed and need so much help. Like, yeah, we need to be able to have open discussions and forums and stuff. So it's happened like a bit, Transbra, this podcast with Mars and this other person. Yeah, so
Yeah.
like they're trans people who are talking to detransitioners. Um,
Hmm.
on some of these networks that we were talking about, like the Gender Care Consumer Network or whatever, there's like detransitioners and trans people both on like the board of directors. So like people, I think it's starting to happen slowly with the more like kind of reality based transsexuals who are like, yes, I'm a male, that's why I have surgery or hormones or something, or that's why I have dysphoria. So
Hmm.
it's happening, but uh part of the problem is that the trans community is pretty big and it's pretty segmented into like trans medicalists, too cutes, like, so even within the trans community there's like all kinds of like fights
Hmm.
already. So it's hard to like, even if you connect with part of the trans community, the other half is going to say that you're evil and hateful,
Hmm.
right? So like it's it's really a
It's
minefield.
bipolar, or well, not even bipolar. It's more complex than bipolarity and stuff. But I think it all comes down to the manner of communication dictates the community and its rules, and then the kind of people that it attracts and that gain power in it. If adversity, if fighting against diversity is what brings everybody together, that then they're going to eventually just need to be fighting all the time. Just like the ground rules, what brings people together is going to manifest in the overall structure and stuff. So if I just to bring it back to not a I guess kind of a warning, but like if we concentrate on the bad actors, then we are at risk of becoming obsessed with the bad actors and then losing sight
Yeah.
of being
Well,
helpful people ourselves.
that's when I was on Twitter, part of what I would do is, um, so when you're really, really in the cult, as I say, like the queer community, when you really, really believe that gender identity supersedes sex and reality, like it's really hard to talk to somebody like that unless you use the language that they know, because otherwise they literally cannot understand the concepts you're explaining to them. So part of what I would do was like, if some trans man came into my things and start talking to me, my notifications start talking to me, I would like purposely use the language that they understand to communicate what it is I'm trying to say, because like
Hmm.
I'm trying to reach these people.
Yeah.
Um, like I want to communicate with them on their level so that they can understand. Like that's something that detransitioners and people who like lib fems or former liberal feminists or former queer theory people who become radical feminists, that's something that they can do, is they can get on their level and explain to them with their own concepts and
Hmm.
their own language like what it is that you're trying to say. Um, part of what you were saying though is like with like the always fighting is like a big part of being like an activist now online is basically attacking people who oppose you, which like I'm not sure how much like like what you're actually doing, like how much it's accomplishing. But like, so I grew up as a teenager, like, and literally, like I would spend half my day like finding like conservative Christian homophobes and like just yelling at them that they're like hateful and evil or whatever. And like I thought that I was like doing activism or whatever. And like this is like what was taught to me. This is what I saw. Like on Tumblr, it's like people would do like call out posts or something, and they would just have like thousands of like reblogs. So this is
Yeah.
like what people learn for years, and then you can't expect them to do something else when that's like what they think activism is and that's what they've been doing. Like they think like fighting against people is activism, when it's like
Hmm.
activism is like building networks or building grassroots organizations or like helping get resources to people, when it's not just like yelling at people on the internet. Um
Hmm. No,
yeah.
I made a post the other day that kind of called out that phenomena of if you're trying to change the world and you go about coercively coercing everybody into being non-discriminatory, like it doesn't work. What you have to do is be positive about it. And I phrased it kind of fancily because there's another conversation that I'm having, but I get called out for being on the side of hate because I'm trying to say that the tools to fight hate are themselves going to turn into hate if you're not careful. If you
Yeah.
don't use the correct tools to fight against this thing, that thing will override your
Yeah.
entire project.
Well, like that's also part of the problem, like especially with like turfs. So like as soon as somebody trans or in the queer community or like a liberal feminist sees somebody as a turf, then they're like a free for all. You can hate this person as much as you want. And
Hmm.
part of the hate is like shutting down any thought about this person. It's like once you hate them,
Yeah.
they're like not even a human. You don't have to think about what they have to say. So it like you said, like it stops communication. I actually made a video about this, how like the turf is like a thought stopping word.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like it, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
really
it's
like,
worth. People call it like a slur, but it's not a slur. It's worse than a slur. I guess maybe that's the essence of a slur is to shut down anything but a specific negative viewpoint on that which has been labeled this thing.
yeah. Well, I think I don't want to comment on whether or not it's a slur, but I definitely will say, like, as soon as somebody is called a TERF,
Yeah,
there's a free for all of death threats and rape threats. So,
yeah.
like, that the word obviously has very harmful
It's a tag.
consequences.
It's a tag. Like
Yeah,
all the sharks go. This is an easy target, or this is the target
yeah,
right now.
yeah. So, yeah, like communication, it's like really hard. Especially like I said, I was on 125 block lists. People would constantly be like, "Oh, you should check out GNCcentric's videos or something," and I would click on the tweet, and the tweets above are all like 25 of them are all like, "You can't see this," or like, yeah, I would be in a conversation with somebody, and I would scroll up, and like every other tweet, I can't see it because I was on so many fucking block lists. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to communicate. They don't want to understand the outside view, which is mind-boggling. Like feminists of like old school would be like, "Oh, why do these people oppose abortion? Let's understand why they feel that way, why they're advocating that way, what they're doing about it. And then we can like have a counter argument, right?" The feminists, the liberal feminists now, they don't want to know anything about the other side. They just want to shut them down and like hunker down in their position, which is like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like infantilizing yourself. Like you're not that stupid. If you wanted to like figure out what's going on, you could. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it really pisses me off that like these people are basically taught to stop thinking. Don't think, just regurgitate rhetoric. And if somebody says something different, tell them to shut up and regurgitate more rhetoric and
Yeah,
ignore them.
and then
Like,
accuse them of regurgitating rhetoric.
yeah, yeah, like I don't know. But it's also like after it's like I said, like it's a learned behavior. After so long of just regurgitating rhetoric and like not acknowledging what other people are saying that's different than you, like you literally cannot accept that information. Like you can't process it because you've been doing this behavior for so long. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to reach these people. Like I care way more about reaching the dysphoric young people online than I care about like calling out these bigger bad actors in the trans community. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I want to use my platform for, and also I don't think I have the power to actually do anything about these bad actors. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm way more concerned with like dysphoric people who are like, I think I'm trans, I'm not sure if I should transition, like what are the pros
Mm-hmm.
and cons. Like I am way more concerned with like those kind of people, or people who've like been in the queer community for a long time, who have experienced some negative things and who want an out but are having trouble getting it out because it's like their emotional dependency or something like that. Like I'm way more concerned with
Mm-hmm.
those people and like reaching those people. Yeah.
Hmm. Well,
Like I
you're on
want
your
to
way.
build bridges.
As long as you're allowed to do it, you're gonna do some good work.
Well, hopefully YouTube doesn't fuck me over, so we'll see.
Well, have you been since your ban? Have people been figuring out how to reach you? Have you gotten
Oh,
support from
I've
people?
gotten a lot of more YouTube subscribers. Just I
Good.
yeah. And then some people have been emailing me. People that
Mm-hmm.
like I was friends with on Twitter. And then also I'm on Spinster. I don't use it very much because it seems to me like some kind of like, no offense to Spinster, but it's like a demented version of Twitter. I'm not totally into that. Like I've been on Twitter since like for like 10 years, so you know like it's like what's going on.
Wait,
Um,
it's a demented version of Twitter, which is a demented version of the public square. So,
like yeah, I don't know. Like no offense to Spinster, like good job to the people who made it, but that's how I feel about it. So I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
well, it might be more the community than the
well, no,
application.
that's
Is that
the
what you're
thing
saying?
too. Is like on Spinster, I know that everybody I'm talking to already probably agrees with what I have to say, and it's like so
Yeah.
why like they're already gonna seek me out. Like I shouldn't be spending my time like trying to disseminate information to them or
Mm-hmm.
present my arguments to them when they already like it's not worth it. You know what I mean? I should find somewhere else. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been a little bit more active on Reddit, but I don't want to get kicked off of subreddits, so I'm trying to be like
Mm-hmm.
careful.
Chill,
And
chill about it.
yeah, and I'm trying to post more on Tumblr. I don't really have like a strategy with what I'm doing on Tumblr, but I want to become like more circulated, even if it's like as like a hate thing. I still want people to be like circulating me more. Yeah, and then hopefully once my blog is up, I have like a couple of like high profile like gender critical people or like journalists or whatever who are like they're like talking to me like almost daily. So once I put
Hmm.
my blog up, they'll like help circulate it. Because
Hmm.
I think like if I'm off Twitter, as long as I have like people who are like well known with a lot of followers who are circulating my stuff, it's like probably
Hmm.
pretty similar to if I was still on Twitter. I don't know. I'm trying to make the best of it.
Our interview, I don't remember when it was. It was the beginning of this year sometime. I can't remember when it was. But
It
it's
was
being
March.
shared over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's
So
shared everywhere. I'm constantly like surprised. It's like fucking everywhere. Like it's like I turn on Facebook and people are like, "Have you seen this interview?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." Um,
that's me.
yeah.
Somebody said this interview proves that if men aren't the center of attention, they get angry and try to dominate the conversation. And I'm like, not the guy who's in the interview though. And they're like, shut up, nobody asked you. I'm like, I'm literally the guy in the interview forming the woman. So sorry to say, not all men, but maybe in this case it's true.
Yeah, I was so nervous for that interview. I was like shaking. I can't believe I stumbled over my words a
Really?
lot. Yeah, I don't know. You probably couldn't tell. Yeah, I was scared, but now I'm like way
That
more
was your
chill.
first. That was your
Yeah,
first. Yeah.
yeah. Like I also did a live stream a couple weeks ago, and I
Yeah,
don't know.
those
I'm
are
getting
nerve
more
wracking.
comfortable being on YouTube now, I think. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
whole other mindset. You're great at it. You're an excellent
Oh,
communicator,
thanks.
which makes it's a total shame that you're being deplatformed. It's unconscionable what you're being,
Yeah.
how you're
Well,
being
my
treated.
plan for now is I want to try and interview like one detransition person every week or two. I just want to
Hmm.
get as many like different stories because like we don't have like any like statistics or like any like medicals or like scientific studies right now. So like all we have is
Hmm.
the anecdotal. So I just want to get as
Yeah.
much anecdotal stuff out there
Yeah.
as possible because like I have people all the time like comment like, "Oh, I connect with you in this way, but your story in this way is not the same as mine." And I'm like, "But there are so many people with stories that are similar and slightly different. Like if I get them all online, people will be like,
Hmm.
"Oh yeah, that's like me." Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So
Eventually,
that's
anecdote does turn into data. I don't know at what point, but there's a point.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
Well, awesome, Ben. I'm gonna have you on again, maybe with Sasha. Maybe I don't know, or
Okay.
if I'm at
Yeah.
your disposal if you need anything, let me
Okay.
know. I'm
If something very dramatic happens, I'll let you know. And just be
okay.
about it. Yeah. I don't know what else could happen now, but we'll see. It's
We'll see.
I
Well,
I
you're the kind of person that trouble finds you, even if you're hiding from it.
yeah, I'm like pretty peaceful and friendly. I don't know. I don't know, like whatever. Like honestly, like if people talk to me, I never have like malicious intent speaking to anyone, like no matter who you are. Well, unless you're like a confirmed rapist or something, but like most
There's a
people,
line.
yeah, but like basically everybody, even if you're like a trans activist, I'm like friendly with you and stuff. Like I actually want to communicate. I actually want to hear what you have to say and I actually want to give you my perspective. Um,
Yeah, it's all those pesky questions, though. You kind of
yeah. That's like how I kind of got
problematic.
like at the very beginning when I was like still in the like queer community, still believing like queer ideology, I started asking questions being like, I'm a
Hmm.
trans man, but I experienced this and this is a thing that women experience. So like what's up with that? And people would like DM me and be like, why are you asking these questions? What's wrong? Blah blah blah. Like so that's like kind of how I started to like leave because I was like, I should be able to ask these questions. Why is nobody has answers? Nobody wants to talk about it. Like what is that? So yeah. Like that's part of like a cult is that you're only allowed to like know the information that's given to you. You're not allowed to like look for your own information outside of it. So like um please ask questions, everybody.
Hmm.
Also like if this video gets a bunch of views like the last video, if you are in Canada and you're like some kind of scientific researcher or a doctor or a therapist or in the medical industry, feel free to contact me if you want to help in some way because I'm trying to set up like networks of people to do stuff and I just need people from all over Canada as much as possible. So
And
if
I
this
will
video
link
gets
your
a bunch of
contact
views,
in the description.
yeah. So now the best way to contact me is GNCcentric@gmail.com. That's like my number one way to contact me. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And
Okay. Cool.
we'll cut it there. What are you
Okay.
up to for the rest of the day?
Um.